each and every day as we die and rise in you. And you serve faith by your holy word. May the words of my mouth and the meditations of all of our hearts be acceptable in your sight, O God, our rock and our Redeemer. Amen. So I want to start with a question. Who is Jesus to you? Is he someone when you need comfort, or when you're sick, you look for healing? Or when you're upset or scared, your comforter? When you need or want something, is he your genie? When you haven't been able to spend time in devotion, is he your guilt trip? Is he your mother's voice in your head? Is he your exercise pal? Is he like a rock star that's too important to bother himself with you? Is he your daily companion who walks with you? When Jesus walked the earth, there were so many different ideas about who he was. And all throughout history, there have been different ways of thinking about Jesus. Who was Jesus? Who is Jesus? And at the time, in the first century, as Jesus was traveling across Galilee and Samaria and Jericho and Jerusalem, there are all sorts of stories that people were hearing about him. The healings, the miraculous feedings, blind men getting their sight, lepers being cleansed, hemorrhaging women being made right again. He was offending religious leaders and had a massive following. And he was eating with tax collectors and sinners. And he's a man who's proclaiming the end of the world and telling people to repent. And a man who captivated so many people's attention that they gave up everything to follow him. Who is this man, Jesus? And Jesus' fame spread all across the land. People were all abuzz about him. So you can imagine the excitement of hearing that Jesus was coming through Jericho, where Zacchaeus was. He was going to pass through. And like everyone else, Zacchaeus wanted to see Jesus. He had heard about him, and after hearing all of this, he wanted to see who he was. Well, imagine the day, people coming out to the streets, a crowd forming, waiting for Jesus to come. And some gathered really early, waiting maybe even some of the earliest hours of the day. And others kept piling on and building the crowd. And the crowd grew large and noisy and chaotic, and they were clamoring to see Jesus, just waiting to see who this man is. Well, Zacchaeus, who wanted to see Jesus too, tried to join the crowd. And he wanted to get a glimpse of him, just a glimpse of him passing by. However, as much as he wanted to see Jesus, he was short. He couldn't see through the crowd. He was short in stature. And he tried, but no one wanted to help him because not only was he short in stature, but he was, in a sense, morally short, maybe, as one commentator said. And no one wanted to help him to be able to see Jesus because he was detested by everybody. If you remember last week, we talked about tax collectors and how they were just despised by the Jewish people because they betrayed them by working for the Roman government. Well, Zacchaeus was a chief tax collector, which meant he was probably even more despised, if that's possible, and he grew very rich from the taxes he collected and the work that he did. So for Zacchaeus, he didn't have much of a chance, and he was very much resented for that. But he had heard about Jesus, that Jesus eats with sinners and tax collectors and had done all of these amazing things. So his chance to see Jesus came. He was going to come through Jericho. And he was going to get a look. It was his chance. So much Zacchaeus wanted. You can imagine jumping up and down, trying to see Jesus over people's heads, or looking and ducking and trying to look underneath through their legs. And he couldn't see through the crowd. And it was so frustrating. And he realized if he didn't do something, he would never get to see Jesus. So he ran ahead, and he found a sycamore tree. He climbed up it, and there he had a view. What would you do to see Jesus? If Jesus came through Hickory, what would you do? Would you travel miles to see him? Would you rearrange your schedule? Would you hope he comes on television so you wouldn't have to go? Would you buy a ticket from a scalper at triple price? Would you climb a tree? I've been a Zacchaeus of sorts. Let me share my story. As some of you may know, I am infatuated with Steven Tyler. I have been since I was 13. And in case you don't know who he is, which I can't imagine, he is the front man of Aerosmith. And he's the lead singer of they've been a band since the 70s. And their music has gotten me through all sorts of things. And Steven Tyler, I love his voice, I love the soul he puts into his music, and the work and passion that they put into everything that they produce. And I admire his big, unapologetic personality. And there are millions and millions of fans across the world from their very beginning days when they were a new band. And I had never gotten to go to a concert. Well, Steven Tyler came out with a country album, and he was touring in Dallas, Texas. And my sister, she lives in Dallas, Texas, and knowing I've loved Steven Tyler since I was 13, she has a job that affords her the ability to purchase tickets like this. So for my birthday this past summer, she bought us 2 tickets to see Steven Tyler in concert. And I was so excited. I couldn't wait. I couldn't even believe that I was going to get the chance to see Steven Tyler live. So we went to the arena, and all the fans were there, lots of fans. We had seats in the 3rd section, which was a really good seat. The lights went down, and the concert started, and it lit up, and he came out on stage. And I could see him. And he wasn't an ant. I could see him. He was far away, but I could see him. And his energy was like anything I had experienced, and it filled the room, and the room was just rocking. It was great. Well, for whatever reason, even in the awesomeness of this new album, people weren't mobbed at the front. In every concert I've seen on television, there's just no space to ever get closer. But now the aisles were open, and my sister nudged me, knowing that this would be my only chance. She said, just go up, just walk through the aisle and get as close as you can. This is a once in a lifetime opportunity. Just do it. And I really don't know, because I don't like to break rules or get out of my seat or anything. And so I was like, I don't know, I know, I really want to get closer, but I'm scared, I can't do it. And so I did, but finally I realized it was my chance. And so I finally decided to leave my seat and to walk up, and I just waited any moment as I walked through that some usher was going to yell at me and usher me out of the building. But I got to almost the very front row. And I got to stay there for about 30 to 40 minutes. And I just basked in getting to be that close to this performer I admired for years. And it was awesome. And I sang with all my heart, and I clapped, and I jumped, and I raised my hands, and I was about 8 feet away from Steven Tyler. It was surreal. So finally, what I expected happened. An usher came and he said, no, you go back to your seat. He yelled at me, he pushed me back, and I just kind of ran and scrambled back to my seat. And I felt bad about doing that. And it was a risk. I could have gotten thrown out for that probably. But let me tell you, I was glad that I took that once in a lifetime chance. And it was upsetting, but I got to see Steven Tyler. And I was on cloud 9 for days after that. And it filled me with the passion to dream on. And this reminds me, what risks would we take to see Jesus? Would we get out of our seats? Would we maybe even go against the rules a little bit because we want to be closer to Jesus? We want to bask in the glory of Jesus. And Jesus sees Zacchaeus in the tree. And Jesus knows Zacchaeus before they even meet. And as Jesus passes through, he calls to Zacchaeus and says, Zacchaeus, hurry and come down, for I'm coming to your house today. And Zacchaeus is changed by his encounter with Jesus. And he pledges half of his income, and all of his possessions, he's going to give away to the poor in this encounter with Jesus. And Jesus announces that this salvation has come to Zacchaeus' house today. Jesus comes when we need him. Jesus sought out and saves the lost. And Jesus comes when we need him, and Jesus comes when we don't think we need him. And we learn from this story of Zacchaeus that Jesus meets us where we are. That it matters, that we want to encounter Jesus, that we want to see Jesus. And Jesus is there when we are short of living the way we're commanded to live. Jesus is there when we fall short of the glory of God, giving us the grace that God desires for us. Because we too, like Zacchaeus, fall short. And all Jesus commands is that we love the Lord our God with all of our heart and our mind and our soul, and to love our neighbors as ourselves. Asking us to risk that our ultimate concern above everything else is God. And giving thanks for the grace that God gives us through Jesus Christ. That we risk our ultimate concern and trust that God is the one who forms and reforms us each time we come to worship and each time we seek Jesus. And that we are formed in love and service to one another, and especially to people who we wouldn't normally seek out. So let us be ever reformed by God's love through Jesus. And don't miss the chance to see Jesus. Amen.